This broadcast has been brought to you by friends and partners of Alfano Ministries International. Thank you for partnering with us today. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to Alfano Ministries podcast. This is Marc Alfano, your host, and I am excited for my next guest. I met Sadi in at the River Church, and I think I sat next to him one time in a service, and I had heard about him because we worked together, and not together, but we actually had worked in the same industry for a little while, and so I knew about him, and but I never really knew about him. And so the more I got to hear his story and to really get to know the person, I got so excited. I'm like, man, I need to have him on for an interview. And so tonight we get the privilege of hearing his story, and I'm going to go ahead and bring him up here. It's Sadi Pekerol. And I know if I screwed that up, you can just
No, it's fine.
correct me. Perfect.
No, it's okay.
And, hey man, I got a name like where everybody calls me Alfano and stuff, so I'm used to it.
Or Fonzie.
Yeah, Alfonso. I always want to add a Z for some reason. Like, why do you got to put a Z in my name?
Yeah.
But so, anyways, Sadi, thank you so much for coming on, man. Like,
Sure.
Basically, just to give you a quick history of why we do what we do. The Lord showed me early on that they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. That's Revelation 11:12. And there's so many people out there who've got an amazing testimony that they don't have a platform to be heard from. Or maybe you do, but it's just, it's so limited. And so if we can do anything we can to spread the word, it helps with, it lifts me up, and it lifts up the people around me.
Sure.
The other thing what you're going to see is this thing develop, because it's going to be, I haven't quite got a grip on the name for the podcast, but, I call it Alfano Ministries Broadcast or whatever, but the Lord dropped in my spirit the 7K project, the 7K revelation or something like that, because in Romans 11:3 and 5, it's Elijah basically complaining to God, and he says, Lord, have they killed all your prophets and torn down the altars? Am I the only one left? And remember what God said. He said, no, there's 7,000 others who haven't bowed the knee to Baal. And so this is like a revelation of other people who are out there actually making big moves for the kingdom, And so that was number two. And then the third reason why we do this is because in Genesis 11:5 and 6, it says, I will read this to you. It says, but then the Lord came and looked at the city. Now, this is when they were building the Tower of Babel. And he says that the people united. He said, look, they're all united and they're unstoppable. And so the enemy wants to divide the church to keep us stoppable. And so I feel like when you break down walls and people can see the inside of all, it doesn't matter your background, where you come from. I mean, I could have a Baptist or a Protestant or Presbyterian or a Holy Roller, right? Doesn't matter, because when you get to know the person, then all those prejudices go away. So anyways, that's the intro. And so let's just jump into it. So first thing is, I'd like to know about you. Tell us about where you grew up and kind of your past and your BC days.
So I grew up the youngest of 5 children, living in Clearwater, Florida. My mom moved down from New York City. Moved down from the New York City, Washington Heights. She moved down from New York City back in the mid '60s to move to Florida. She came down here with my 3 brothers and my sister. And when she moved down here, for probably about a year and her moving down here, she met my dad. And my dad at that time was in a band. So I was born. That was the only child that my dad had between my mom and me. And I was born, obviously, so I was born the youngest of 5. My father was a Grammy Award-winning musician that was part of a band called the Winstons that had a hit single back in 1969 called Color Him Father. And so, my dad at that time in his life was on tour. And so he met my mom while they were playing as a session band at the place which is called the Crystal Lounge, AKA it is now the the Fort Harrison, aka headquarters for Scientology. But downstairs, there used to be a place called the Crystal Lounge, and my dad's band used to play there, and my mom worked at IHOP. And so after they got done playing, they'd go to IHOP, and my mom was a waitress, and my dad was, obviously struck with the Cupid arrows there, and so he wanted to marry my mom. So I grew up in Clearwater. I went to Clearwater. I went to Clearwater High School. Went to Largo. I went to a lot of different high schools and middle schools because my mom moved around a lot back in those days, and she was a nurse. She was studying to be a nurse, so she was raising five kids on a single income before she met my dad, or four kids on a single income before she met my dad. And her and my dad were married for about 3 years, and then they divorced. And then obviously she was raising five kids on a single income. So a lot of my roots come from there. My sister went to Dunedin High, but two of my brothers went to Largo High. My other brother was a dropout, and of course, I was a dropout. But my last high school I went to was Tarpon Springs High School, and that was back in the, all of this transpired between the '70s, '80s, and '90s. But yeah, I grew up in Clearwater. Clearwater. I got saved at Countryside Christian Church in 1996. I had a pretty radical encounter with the Lord after living a life of debauchery. Between the ages of 18, 19, started experimenting with drugs and partying, and I was living in Ybor City. Met a lot of Hollywood stars. Hung around people, in that scene. River Phoenix's sister, Keanu Reeves. They were all in bands back then. Obviously they were actors, but they had, they also did music. And I worked in the nightclub scene. I was a professional dancer, and I was a bouncer. Believe it or not, I was a security guard back then. I was pretty skinny, so I don't know how you classify me being security, but I would bust people for using drugs or underage drinking. Um, just living a really crazy life, and I grew up Assemblies of God. I grew up in the church. So my grandmother had a very significant influence on my life, as a young kid. So, the Bible says, unless the seed falls on the ground and dies, it can't bear forth much fruit.
Mm.
So when my grandmother died, she died and she went to go be with Jesus, but she left her legacy and a lot of her impartation into my life. And even though for a season I went astray and I did my own thing and partied, when the first time I set foot back in church was 25 years old. And the very first time I set foot back in church, I got saved.
Mm.
So, the devil knew he didn't have a whole lot of time, and because he knew as soon as I set my foot back to church, it was over. So, I was in the rave scene, and I partied pretty hard, and just got to a place in my life where everything was coming apart at the seams, and I think I was having a nervous breakdown, to be quite honest with you. And I cried out to God, because I knew if I died, I was going to a lost eternity. And I didn't know Jesus. I never heard of Rodney Howard Brown, never heard of all these other ministers. I was just searching for God. I was just searching for truth. I was searching for life. I was searching for a way out of my problems and my situation. And then basically how I got saved was I was at a coffee shop and I was hitting on a girl. And the girl I was hitting on was the senior pastor's daughter of a mega church in Clearwater called Countryside Christian Center, John Lloyd. His daughter's name's Elizabeth Lloyd, and her boyfriend was Michael Koulianos from Jesus Image. So yeah, God kind of, that's way before he was married. He was still in high school, and me and Michael Koulianos from Jesus Image, we went to the same high school. But I was supposed to graduate in 1990, and he was in 1989. I was supposed to graduate in '89, and he graduated in '96. So I was about 7 years older than he is. So I think Michael's around 46 years old now. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my background. Obviously, I got radically saved, filled with the Holy Ghost 3 weeks later, and the rest was history.
Yeah. And then so at that point, now that you're saved and you're on fire, like what do you do next? I mean, you got to get trained up. You know, like
Mm.
what was your next step? I mean, were you just out there winning souls on the street, or what
No,
were you doing?
actually, yeah. Well, that too. I mean, I didn't even know what what they use the soul winning script or something like that now.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't even have that.
It wasn't invented. It wasn't
No,
invented
it
yet.
wasn't. It wasn't even invented, bro. It was just like all I knew is God touched me. God changed me. He saved my life, and I wanted to tell everybody about it. I just wanted to
Yeah.
tell people how awesome God was. My salvation experience was very, very real. It was very, 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 very tangible.
Mm.
Um, just, I was physically overwhelmed by the presence of God, and I mean, I don't. There's not words,
Yeah.
I really had an encounter with Jesus, Woo! I had a real encounter with him. I was very, very, very remorseful for my lifestyle and my sin.
Mm.
Very remorseful for living a very selfish life. And, I didn't do it out of, I guess you could say, I didn't do that out of arrogance. Um, I did it out of ignorance.
Mm.
So when I had an encounter with Jesus and I got saved, I realized that, it was my sins that nailed him to the cross.
Mm.
And it was that I deserved that, not him. And I don't know if you want to call it guilt or remorse, but an incredibly supernatural conviction came upon me. And I felt like I did that to him. And, obviously snot and tears and but that's going on in my heart where I just got, you just totally beside yourself. And it was interesting because when I was saying that sinner's prayer, I started prophesying out of my mouth
Wow.
about my brothers and sisters coming to the Lord.
Mm.
And, it was very, very profound, and I mean, I didn't know what prophecy was. Didn't even tell about that stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, I just, I had an encounter with God and it stayed with me. And it's like, I would, after I got saved, I guess that's, you could say my, my Jedi training began, you know what I mean? Like hearing the voice of God. If God told me to pick up a trash can, I picked up a trash can, man. If he told me to take my shirt off my back and give my shoes to the person on the street corner, that's what I did. And I mean, it was just daily bread, daily situations that God began to speak to me. And obviously, I was going to Countryside Christian Center, and it was funny because I had this friend named Fred Hammond, and he's a carpet layer and he used to lay carpet. So we would go to his house at night after doing carpet, and a bolt of lightning struck his condo. So the only thing that worked on the television was channel 16 and 22.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we would watch You and Me, and we would watch God's News Behind the News with Ray Brubaker, and Jack Van Couvering. It was just like, and then Jack and Rex Sullivan and D. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Bible man, that was it. I mean, I was like watching like TD Jakes back in the day. You know what I mean? Um, and we would, that's what we had, channel 16 and 22. And I didn't go to the movies. I didn't do anything. It was just go to church, go to church, go to church. So I, obviously I found out about at that time, and I think it was in 96, the Brownsville revival started on Father's Day in 1996 when we broke out. So I had these friends from my church going up to Pensacola and saying, man, they were bringing back these videos, and we would have these gatherings at the house, and somebody would stick the VHS tape in, and I just started watching this guy, Steve Hill, preach. And I was like, holy God, what's happening in Pensacola? Like the people getting baptized and pulled out of the baptismal pool like flopping fish.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I got to go up there because whatever that is, I want it. When you've done drugs and you've been in the nightclub scene, you really want to experience the supernatural because you were so yielded to a dimension already by tripping on psychedelic drugs and tripping on acid and mushrooms and smoking weed. I mean, I did a lot of psychedelic stuff because I wanted to get out of my head because the brokenness and the hurt of growing up without a father and feeling hopeless and feeling like a loser and being bullied in high school and all those things that were trauma. You're looking for escape, you're looking for a way out. We used to do a lot of drugs and play Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm.
and that was it. That was our social time. But so when I got saved, it was just like I want it all. I mean, I want to experience the supernatural. I want to experience this realm that everybody's talking about. Um, and I didn't want to accept no for an answer. So when I saw what was happening in Brownsville, I was just like, let's go up there. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to have an encounter like all those people in the baptismal pool. Well, brother, you get up there for 4 days, all you're doing is running down to the altar. You just running to the altar and repenting because you're like, well, you can't say no because the message was so hot. It was so hot that you just wanted to make sure you didn't have anything in your heart or you just didn't want to have you. You're saved, but you wanted to get saved. You know what I mean? You were just running to the altar. And so I was doing a few trips up to Brownsville, and then I'd heard about the Brownsville School of Fire. And then I had a friend that came back with a tape, and I was sitting in the parking lot, and he says, "Hey man, you got to listen to this guy. He's from South Africa, and they stuck this tape in his cassette that he stuck this cassette tape in his car, and he plays it, and I'm listening to this guy with this. He sounded like it was like an English Australian accent, and I thought, and I remember looking at my friend and said, I didn't know black people spoke like they were Australian." That's what I told him. I was just like, they got Australians living in Africa, And that was Pastor Rodney, of course, because
Yeah,
I'd never heard an accent like that before. And he's like, "No, we just came back from this church over at the Sun Dome in Tampa, and this guy's name's Rodney Howard Brown." So that was in December, and I was just like, "Well, I want to go to the church service with you guys." He says, "Well, let's go next Sunday." So I went to the next Sunday service, and Pastor Rodney had a mullet back then.
yeah.
He had this colorful sweater on that looked like the coat my father gave me. And I wasn't going there every Sunday. I was just like, I was still kind of going to countryside. And obviously I went there that Sunday. I thought it was cool. My friend was telling me, my friend Fred went there. He says, "Man, you got to go to this church." He laid hands on me. And when he did, I fell to the ground and I saw all these beautiful colors. And I'm thinking, and then I was like, wow, that's
Sure.
awesome. So obviously I go there and I see the colorful sweater.
Yeah.
You saw his sweater.
Yeah.
Did you see his
Of course
sweater?
you did.
you know.
Yeah.
So anyways, I started going to his church, the river, here, there, and then some friends would say, "Hey, let's go check it out." And then I remember going there, and then they said, "Hey, Rodney's having this camp meeting. Pastor Rodney's having this camp meeting with, some people called him Rodney because he wasn't our pastor just yet. He's having this camp meeting. It's called the Sweet Presence of Jesus, and they're having it in the winter camp meeting, and we should go." And I remember going to that camp meeting, and man, it was just lit. And they were giving away scholarships because the Bible school was starting in August of 1997.
Mm.
And I became friends with Pastor Rodney's brother-in-law, which is Pastor Donica's sister Colleen. Her brother, Colleen's husband's name is Daryl Rain, and then his Pastor Donica's youngest brother, named Willis, or Oral was his middle name. They said, "Hey, they were building the Bible school on Bush Boulevard in a storefront church. Well, it was an old cowboy club, gay cowboy club,
Wow.
and they were refurbishing it. So like, hey, we'll give you a scholarship. Are you looking for a job?" And so RMI hired me. I could say I worked for RMI, way back in the day, so we actually built the Bible school
Wow.
from scratch. So I was one of the first students to go to RBI as a charter graduate from 1997.
Wow.
And I actually went to school with Pastor Eric and Jennifer Gagnon. They were my
Wow.
classmates. And there's a lot of other people I went to school with there. And back then, it was pretty amazing. A lot of the instructors we had, it wasn't like the regular. It wasn't like the regular people. Pastor Rodney literally had people coming in every week, evangelists, prophets, teachers, pastors. It wasn't like, it was a different breed back then. We had like um, uh, was it L.C. Hutton, or I can't think of his name. What his name is, Hutton. He does studying the Book of Revelation. We had um, Pastor. Was the pastor from the River Church in Louisiana, Frank Bailey. We had everybody, Mike Francine, Oral Roberts, Richard Roberts. I mean, we had everybody coming and teaching. I mean, we had hands laid on us every single week. It was just like we were the first line of troops. We were the guinea pigs, and so Pastor Rodney did not pull any punches. Like, he unleashed all of heaven on us.
Yeah.
And that was my first year. That was my first year of salvation, and my first year of 1997 was my first year going to Bible school. And I finished my first year, and I wanted to cuss out every instructor and throw my chairs across the room. Like every other Bible school student wants to
Yeah.
quit because they can't handle the dying of the flesh. But I made it.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't throw your chair.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. They don't like that. I know when I did, they got a little irritated.
I'm sure that they did. Security, some of the security would have thrown you out of the building.
Yeah, they're like, hey, you need to see the deans. They need to have a meeting with you in the office. I'm like, hey,
Yeah,
it happens.
yeah, it
Sometimes people
happens.
push. Sometimes
It's a,
people push your buttons.
yeah, but I mean, really, really great learning experience. You know what I mean? We had school at night then. It was like 5:50 to 8:50 at night, and
Yeah.
I worked a job every day. I had to pay for my tuition.
Yeah, right. Now, was there a lot of students in that class, or was it?
I'd say about 200, 225,
Wow,
maybe 250, somewhere around there.
that's
I could be
good.
wrong.
That's great. Yeah.
I could be wrong.
I mean, for a brand new startup, that's huge.
Yeah, I would say, but obviously a lot of them didn't finish. I mean, it was just like
Yeah. Well, his
it was
it's
like
it's
it
like
was
it's
like
like the
going
Navy
in.
SEALs. Yeah,
It's
it's like
like
the Navy
Navy
SEAls.
SEALs, bro. It's
Yeah.
like dwindled. I think by the time we graduated, it was maybe 100 people.
Yeah, they're out there ringing the bell. Like I'm
Yeah,
out.
going home.
Yeah. Can't
You
take
want
it.
to quit?
Yeah.
Ring that bell.
Ring it.
I remember
Yeah.
one of the things that Pastor Rodney said. He said, if we got to tie you guys to these poles inside of this building till you get the fire of God on you, we'll tie you to the poles and lay hands on you.
Wow.
And I mean, man, and
Now,
I mean, I think I never even, I was still learning how to yield.
yeah.
I didn't even know what that was. I mean, it's like, it wasn't until like my second or third year that I really started getting hammered, like yielding to the Holy Spirit and really pressing in and to understand that and what it meant to wait upon the Lord. Because you see everybody getting this joy and like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
You know what I mean? Everybody's getting touched, and you're like, why am I not getting touched like them? And just I didn't understand it. I was in my head a lot. So, but yeah, so
Hmm.
it was really, really awesome year. And then uh I had to pay for my Bible school. Like I
Yeah.
said, it wasn't free. Everybody's getting a scholarship. I'm like, I wish we would have got scholarships.
Yeah. Right.
But I paid my first year, and then I had to pay my second year. My third year was free.
Okay.
So
Now, back in those days, did they take you on the road a lot more? Did you guys do outreaches and things like that?
no, we didn't actually start doing outreaches until 1998. I think the
Okay.
first time we did. I remember. I remember the first outreach we did because that's the first outreach that I met my wife on, and I was
Oh.
19. That was October of 1998.
Okay.
Karen came to Bible school. You've met my wife, and Karen came to Bible school, and they took a bus. I remember Church Without Walls, Randy and Paula White, at that time her first husband. They gave us a bus, and one of their people from their church took a whole busload of us students down to Guavaween,
Wow.
and we didn't even have the gospel soul winning script yet.
Hmm.
And we were carrying signs, free prayer. And I remember we went down to Ybor City, and Guavaween is so demonic. But we went down there, and there was probably 80 students on the bus from RBI, and we all just got unloaded and went soul winning the whole evening down there from like, I guess it was like 8 o'clock till 2 in the morning. And there were some really crazy supernatural encounters we had. But that's when we kind of started, dabbling with the outreach aspect. We didn't really start hitting outreaches until after Good News New York. I mean, we did do some stuff, but like this gospel soul winning script really didn't come into full picture until after Good News New York. It was that's all they used the script. The
Yeah,
script was,
right, right. Now, were
you know.
you up there whenever that was going on too, or?
I was. In fact, actually, Pastor James McCurdy flew me up there. I
Wow.
ran his book table in the evenings, and I worked at Nyson's New York School of Urban Ministry during the day. It was I'll never forget it because it was super, super hot up in New York City that summer. It was like a massive heat wave, and we were staying in this hospital that they were refurbishing, and there's a room that had a water cooled. It was a water cooled room that came from the basement. And the reason why that specific pipeline from the basement straight up was because they chilled I think it came from the roof. That water cooler that chilled at the top, because it wasn't AC. It was a water chilled air cooling unit, and they had to chill the hospital room for the sterilization
Hmm.
of some of the surgical equipment that they had. And I just remember that it was so hot. You could literally take a shower, go lie in your bed for 20 minutes, and be sweating all over again.
Wow.
And but it was a really great summer. So we would work during the day. I'd work in the kitchen. I would work in the kitchen. I'd sweep the floors, did whatever I could to help. And then at night we would go down. I'd work the book table for James McCurdy, and then I would be part of the crusade at night. And then obviously did soul winning when I can. Um, but I was there 6 weeks, 48,459 souls.
Wow.
Yeah, it
What
was
a
pretty
legacy.
outstanding. I mean, and when T.D. Jakes was there, like people were walking, you could feel the whole floor was shaking at the
Wow.
gardens. Like there were so many people jumping up, marching, jumping up and down. They couldn't even fit. They couldn't even fit the people in the arena because there's
Yeah.
so many people that got turned away because Jake showed up. You
Wow.
know. Yes.
Yeah. And then, you think that there'll be a resurgence because I remember in those days, the big stadiums were the thing.
Yeah.
Everybody was doing it.
Yeah. It was the thing that I mean, there were people telling Pastor Rodney, "Your ministry's going to fail. You didn't hear from God. You're going to go bankrupt." I mean,
Mm.
if he had listened to what everybody was telling him, then he would never do what God told him to do. But God spoke to him in a dream with Billy Graham.
Yeah.
Said, "Go to New York, launch the biggest crusade since the '50s. I'm with you."
Wow.
And he just ran with it. That's the one thing about Pastor Rodney. He gets something, he's like a bulldog. Once he bites onto it, forget it. He's done. You're not going to get his teeth on that thing. Once he bites his teeth on something, it's over.
Yeah.
His teeth of faith. When he
Yeah.
locks onto something, it's like he gets lockjaw and he doesn't let go. You
Right.
know.
Yeah, so now as you progress through now, you get married obviously, and then,
hmm
are you and your wife working together in ministry, or how's that look,
Yeah.
like in the early
So
days of that?
yeah. So after we came back from Good News New York, we got married in 1999. It was a pretty big
Wow,
deal
quick,
because,
man.
huh?
Yeah, it was like your progression goes from like being in clubs to being, set free, saved through Bible college
Yeah, bro,
and married.
it was like first it went from first gear straight to fifth.
Yeah,
I know
right.
it was about saved in 96, 90, me
Yeah.
and my wife in 98, get married, get engaged in 99, get married in 2000. And actually I got my bachelor's of theology, she got her diploma, and then our first missions trip we did to South Africa was just to go visit family, and I preached one service at a place called Secunda. That was 2000, Christmas of 2000. Came back, worked as a valet at Moffitt Cancer Center by USF. She was working as a nanny for a rich family with their kids. And then we decided to move to Hawaii,
Hmm.
and we were going to go help the people that married us. Pastor Nick and Esther Van Ransburg, and we just said, hey, we want to go say goodbye to family. They were, 4-year commitment to go out there to the island and help them with their church. We didn't have any kids, so we were going to pack up everything and just go. And so 2002, they bought us plane tickets to South Africa. We flew back to go say goodbye to my wife's family. And in the midst of going back there to visit them, revival broke out. We were having revival for 2 weeks straight in Durban, and then we had revival up in Johannesburg. I mean, God just started showing up and just slamming people, like crazy signs and wonders, just provision, you name it. I mean, the fire of God, salvation, supernatural encounters just happened. I remember emailing the dean of the Bible school to tell Pastor Rodney what God was doing, so that by the time he flew back to America, you know, we were going to tell Pastor, we'd heard, hey, did you hear about what happened? We said, what? They said, Pastor was preaching a message about you guys. We're like, what? They're like, yeah, he was preaching a message about you guys and thinks you guys should have stayed in Africa. I'm like, no, I'm going to Hawaii to suffer for Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm not going to Hawaii, but we saw Pastor Rodney, and he said, and I remember we were there, and I was going to leave to go to Hawaii, and in the midst of going to leave to go to Hawaii, I wanted to go say goodbye to him, and because I remember the day before that, I'm like, God, I don't feel to go back to Africa, and I was just weeping. I was just like, I did not want to do it. I was just crying my eyes out. I said, God, I can't do it. I'm like, well, if you want me to do it, then these are the 3 different things you're going to have to do. Pastor Rodney's going to have to endorse us and help us get back there and fly us. And we don't even have any money. And I said, if you really want me to do that, then you're going to have to speak to him. And so I remember there was the final Sunday we were at the church, and we were going to get on drive our cars out to California and put it on a boat, send it to Hawaii. And he called us up in his office, and he said, why are you going to Hawaii? I said, well, this is what we feel to do. And he says, what are you going to go do? Hospital visits and catch people? He said, you are having revival in Africa. This is what God's called you to do. This is what you went to Bible school for. And then he said, hey, I'll buy your plane tickets. I'll write you a check for $1,000, and I'll license and ordain you guys and help you start your ministry.
Wow.
And so it was actually him and Adonica that launched our ministry.
Wow.
They licensed, they ordained us, they believed in us when nobody else did.
Yeah.
So we were, it was Corey and Rose. They just started their church. Their church is brand new. They just started their church in Istanbul, Turkey. In fact, I helped in '99 before I married Karen. We were just getting engaged. I planted that church with Corey. So when there was 3 different missionary teams that went to Turkey, and I was my middle fingers. The first one was Ankara. That was the earthquake. Second team they went to another city, and the third team was us, and we planted the church in the basement of a hotel. And back then, you couldn't call it a church; you had to call it a club.
Yeah.
So just me, 1, 2. So there was, what was it? It was me, Mike Graham, Bonnie. 1, 2. So it was 4. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. There was 5 of us, and then Corey and Rose is 7. There's 7 of us, and we went and did it, and we were there 2 weeks. Every day we were outside evangelism. We were down by the Catholic Church, and at night we were having revival services down in the basement of this hotel. And then anyways, to fast forward beyond that, we're 2002, and Pastor Ronnie launched us out. We spent 6 months traveling across South Africa, and came back to America. Went again in 03. 04, we were there for 6 months. We worked on the Soweto Crusade with him and traveled all over South Africa. And then 2005, we were with Eric and Jennifer. We worked side by side with them on the Umlazi Crusade. I was the assistant crusade director for, I ran all the ads and the advertisement throughout the city, posters and flyers, and I had 12 Zulu guys underneath me, so it was constantly marketing the crusade and traveling all over the place. And one white guy and eight Zulu guys in the back seat doesn't look like a good picture, but we. And then they did another crusade, Marmelodia. I didn't do that one. I kind of backed out, and I feel kind of stupid because I was operating by the flesh. I should have went and did that crusade. And then the next one, of Ditsani, we went to that one. That was over in East London, and I spent 2 weeks there. And then just for the next, 20 years. It was just back and forth. Then we moved to South Africa for 2 years. My wife's mom had breast cancer, and we just traveled across South Africa. So South Africa's obviously always been in my heart. I know South. I mean, I know pretty much all the cities: Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth. How to get to them, how to drive to them, where to go. You know. So yeah, there's a lot of I got a lot of roots over there. Even though I'm American, speak a little bit
Yeah.
of Zulu and Afrikaans. My kids got roots over there. We got family over there. So yeah, it's been quite an adventure. Been quite a journey
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah, and then so in with Pastor Corey and Rose in Istanbul now, you said your name's Turkish, so do you have some roots over there, or was
Yeah,
some of your
so
family from there?
my grandfather was a Turkish immigrant from Istanbul. He moved over here in the 40s. He met my grandmother, who was from Augusta, Georgia. They got married in November 7th, 1941. How's that for irony?
Wow.
December 7th is the day of infamy.
Yeah.
So 30 days after my grandmother got married, the Pearl Harbor got attacked, and they were living in Burbank, California. And she kind of freaked out and moved back to Washington, D.C., because they didn't know what the Japanese were going to do. They were putting them in interim camps back then, because they were like, well, if they bombed us in Pearl Harbor, who's to say they might not attack or bomb us in our public schools or city?
Right.
So the Japanese were pretty much, there was a lot of prejudice it was a lot of unfairness by the American people showed towards the Japanese, because you can't blame them. It's not like they were running around with suicide vests,
Yeah.
um, but my grandfather stayed in Washington, stayed in LA, and my grandmother moved back to, California. She had my dad. She was already pregnant with my dad, so had my dad 6 months. But yeah, I have a Turkish name because of
Yeah.
that.
Now this is a side question because Pastor Corey always talks about how great the food is over there in Istanbul and Turkey. What do you think of it? You can be honest.
Well, the first day we got there in 1999, like half the team got sick. They went to some
Okay.
restaurant. I mean, I remember this one girl named Bonnie. She was on the toilet every day. Like, it was terrible. Then, then Laura, my friend Scott and Laura Shepard, she was puking her brains out. Our friend Eva was there too. Eva was sick. So every one of them, but I didn't eat the same food that they did. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The rest of them were sick. I mean, if you saw a Pizza Hut, you were like, "Hallelujah, thank you, Jesus." You were worshiping Pizza Hut, Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
So, I saw a Pizza Hut and they were playing Elvis music on the inside. I said, "I feel like I'm at home." There
Yeah.
was a Burger King there. But I said, you know what? I need to go taste Pizza Hut. At least enough it's a franchise. The sauce has to be a certain order. The cheese has to
Yeah.
be a certain way. But when the very first day we got there, like I said, one, two, three people on our team got totally sick for like the next 4
Wow.
days. Next 4 days, they were out
Devastating.
of commission. So they were just
Wow.
like, "Bring me toilet paper." It was like, "If we have a few rolls of
Missions.
toilet, let me a whole pack of toilet paper." I'm like, man, oh God.
Yeah.
But no, they eventually got better, and like I think the last 8 days of their trip, they got to be involved in a lot of what we did. We almost got arrested because I was evangelizing, and I got pretty charismatic about doing some breakdancing in the town, what's it called, Tuxum Square. It's the center of town, and I was drawing too much attention, and I ended up getting the attention of the secret police, and man, we almost got arrested, but God blinded their eyes to where they couldn't see the Bible, so that was good.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
we made.
that was that was actually a question I was going to ask you was is coming up in dance and all that kind of stuff. The Bible says your gift makes room for you. So how much of that gift from your early days transitioned into how you led people to the Lord and your ministry life? Was there any of it that carried over, like the boldness or just any of that stuff? Like, what do you
Oh,
think?
I was always bold.
Yeah.
But I think the dancing gift, I used it one time. My friends were founders of a Christian school in Jacksonville, and they asked me to be a choreographer at their Christian school. So I was a choreographer for a year, and I helped these kids to do a dance routine for their end of two. I think two of the end of the year functions they did. But as far as dance goes, I never really used that as an evangelism tool. But networking and marketing is something I was always really good at doing. So God's used that over the years to connect people, to help make things happen for people. Everybody always says, "Man, you're the master networker." I'm like, well, I didn't even know what networking was until after I got saved. A lot of my gifts were dormant, and they ended up popping up later in life, like photography. I didn't even know I could be a photographer, but God gave me an anointing for that.
Yeah.
Working in marketing and promoting for films, and I didn't know I had that. God made an avenue for me to do that. And so there's yeah. So as far as the dancing goes, I never really had a thing for that, but movies and filmmaking, I was able to witness to. You know, I was able to witness to a lot of different movie stars and lead them to Jesus, and
Wow.
and witness and share my testimony with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's times that God used my gift as an accessory or a tool to help, I wouldn't say push the gospel on somebody, but influence the gospel on somebody.
Yeah, because when he says that, he says that your gift makes room for you, but it sets you in front of kings,
Yeah,
and at high places. And so, like you were talking
yeah,
about your connections. I know you've done stuff in the music industry
yeah,
and things like that. So I mean,
yeah.
you can,
So yeah,
go ahead.
so when it comes to the music stuff, I've never done anything in music
Yeah.
ever. My dad did.
Okay.
So the whole gift of gab, the ability to talk to people, network and connect people, that that popped up in the music industry because a big music executive, like major music manager, saw me like marketing films and getting them into AMC theaters, and they're like, "Do you get paid to do that?" I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Well, if you can do that and you can network people like that, well, you can work for me as a talent scout." I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay." And then obviously I went and talked to my pastor, went and talked to Pastor Rodney about it, said, "Do it full time." So I went for it, and I gave the Lord 2 months to show me that's what He wanted me to do, because I would have to generate the revenue for it. And my first month, I made $14,000, and
Wow.
I was like, "This." And then after that, it was just like $10,000 a month, 12,000, 20,000. It was crazy. I think my
Yeah.
first year I made $126,000.
Wow.
Just crushed it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was like that for first, second, third, and fourth year, and then the fourth, fifth, and sixth year went,
Yeah.
but for the first 3 years, it was like over 100 grand. It was just crushing it.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, Ann Wilson right now, one of the artists, you can check them out. I think they're the top 14 in American Idol. Sam Keiko. All of his
Okay.
songs are original, and he worked with the same people that Ann Wilson worked with. And
Wow.
I found him online in 2019. Now the guy's playing all the same original music that he did with us on American Idol, and he's at the top 12. I
Wow.
think he'll win the show.
Yeah.
you know. But I mean, like I said, I was responsible for vetting those artists and like making sure that they're serious about the music industry. That's what happened with Ann Wilson. Ann Wilson is you know, 3-time nominee, Grammy Award, Billboard Music Award, American Music Award. She's played at the Grand Ole Opry at least 5 times.
Hmm.
Her movie was in the new Jesus Revolution,
Oh yeah. That sounds
something
good.
water, baptismal water. I don't know, man. Just her music was in the ending credits. I mean, she's billboard all over the place now. Like
Wow.
she's going straight country and gospel, so she does both.
Yeah. Now, how did you connect with her? Like, what was the? I mean,
I
just
found her
were
on
you?
YouTube. I just
Wow.
found her on YouTube. She had one song. I found her on YouTube. She was 16-year old, super innocent, super not naive. She just, obviously she had never did the music industry stuff.
Yeah.
And I sent her to Nashville, set her up with some meetings, got her with the right people. Uh, 8 months later, she pulled together her resources to make it happen, and they started working with her. And that song, "My Jesus," that took about 4 years to do before they
Yeah.
released it. And it was
Wow.
a number one hit, number one on the Billboard charts for 8 weeks straight.
Yeah. Now,
So,
now, as a part of that, did you get to connect with a lot of those musicians and things, or do you just like
oh
you
yeah,
connect them? Yeah.
I mean, I got to connect with a lot of people. I mean, there was a whole team that I worked with, so I was able
Yeah.
to help out a lot of other artists. Obviously,
Right.
once you have an artist that's really successful, and you can prove that that artist is successful, it looks good when you talk to other people that want to take the same path. But
Yeah.
there's one thing I did say to him. I said, "Look, I don't ever want this opportunity that I have with you to replace our friendship. The minute it becomes like that, I'm going to quit." And I said, "And if the grace of God dries up with this job, I'm out of here."
Yeah.
And that's what happened last year. It was just 5 months, nothing was happening. It was like dead, dead, dead in the water. And I knew that the Lord was bringing it. You know, I had 2 dreams that I was leaving that business.
Mm.
The Lord showed me, and I know the Lord was bringing it to a close.
Yeah.
And I left. I was done.
Wow.
And so, I mean, because you can't push something that isn't God, right? You don't strike the rock twice. We heard that a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, you know, and it was just time to move on, and I did, you know. But I was able to help a lot of people make a lot of money. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Don't you wish you got a little royalty from some of
Well, I mean, I made it. I
that?
made enough off of them getting signed up that
Yeah.
because there's never a guarantee in that business,
Yeah.
ever.
Right. Right.
There's never a guarantee, But they sign up for that, knowing that, that there's never going to be a guarantee,
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I think I have. You want me to go get it? I'll show it to you guys real quick. Let me show you
Yeah.
something
Let's see
real
it.
quick.
Let's
Just
see
hold
it.
on,
Yeah.
hold on, real quick. Little thing that they gave me.
Wow. Check that out.
Yeah. So it
Check it
says,
out.
presented to Sadi Pekerol to commemorate multi-week #1 radio single "My Jesus" from Ann Wilson. Billboard Christian Airplay, Billboard Christian AC monitored, Metabase Christian Airplay, Billboard AC. So it's the first ever female solo artist to debut single, to debut to sorry, first ever female solo artist debut single to reach #1 at Billboard Christian Airplay. So basically, it was a historic #1 song. There's never been a female vocalist in the history of Billboard music to go to #1 with her first single ever. Not even Lauren Daigle.
Wow.
So Ann was the first artist
She's
in the history.
gifted.
She was the
Gifted.
first artist in the history of music on the Billboard charts. Well, first artist in Billboard music history to go to #1 with her very first song that she released.
Wow.
Yeah, and that hasn't happened. So I thought, everybody thought Lauren Daigle was an enigma. Ann Wilson's old. She's got like
Yeah.
3 million listeners on
Yeah. We haven't
Spotify.
even
It's just
seen the
ridiculous.
seen the half of it. I'm sure. You know.
Yeah, she's got like 50 million streams on just My Jesus, and there's probably over like 600 million streams altogether,
Yeah.
or if not
So
a
let's.
thousand. She's already gone platinum, like double platinum on the album already.
Wow. So like for any artist out there who's given their heart, on TikTok and YouTube, don't give up the faith. You never know what
No,
could happen.
and be prepared to spend lots of money.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, I
You know,
just saw
people,
that one guy that sings that song "Rich Man from Richmond" or whatever, and
yeah,
he's sat
people
there
are like,
with his
oh,
guitar. Yeah,
won't you
and
help
it's
me?
like,
Won't you help
yeah,
me? Can't we collaborate? Sure, for 65 grand, we can
yeah,
collaborate.
exactly right.
But that's the truth, because just to get the writers and producers, and
Yeah,
to actually have it's like starting a restaurant. You have to have a
yeah,
functional team. You
yeah,
can't just, you could do it on your own. Most people figure it out in 7 to 8 years, or, it's kind of like buying one of those homes that either you build the home up from the ground, or you get one that's in a box.
yeah,
One of those box homes, you know what I mean? You hit a button
yep.
and it folds out and boom, it pops up,
Yeah.
if that's how you want to look at it.
Well, it's funny because like I wrote a book about my history in the restaurant business and all this stuff, and I mean it's because I worked
Yeah.
in four Michelin star restaurants and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and but I'm stuck because the same thing. It's like it's finances. Like that. I mean,
It
I have a
is.
lady. She's like, listen, I can strategize your book. I can get you a book deal. I can get you connected with the agents. I can do all that. But the fee's so high. It's like, man.
Well, it's like, and I always use this analogy, and you being a restaurant entrepreneur, you could probably understand it. But I tell these artists, it's like you have to invest in your restaurant. I said it's like 4 restaurants being on the corner. It's like having 4 restaurants all in the same street block.
Yeah,
You're all in a different corner, and you all have a different menu. The question is whose menu is going to outdo the other?
yeah,
You all have a menu and you all have recipes, but what are the ingredients you're using? Because that's what you're selling. I said, you don't know if you're going to make it or break it. I said, but
right.
it's up to you to decide what type of ingredient you're going to use. Organic, what kind of ingredients you're going to use. You're going to make pizza with hard water or spring water dough. How are you going to do what you're going to do? And you can't just. You're going to have to get a loan to open the restaurant. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to put on the menu. And what are you offering? What are you making? What is attractive about what you're offering that sets you apart from the other restaurants?
Mm.
And I said, that's the music business. You know, you just have
Yeah.
to find your sound, find your place, and find out what sets you apart different from everybody else. And be prepared to spend money. If you're
Yeah.
not willing to lose money, then you're not willing to do the music industry. That's
Yeah.
just
Right.
it. There's no, never has a sailor sailed smooth seas. You know,
Right.
so that's just my take on that aspect of the industry.
Yeah, and then the other side of it too is you see so many anointed people, people who really have an anointing for the Lord, and then they get into that world, and you watch them degrade over time. You watch
Yeah,
them get sucked into the dark side, really.
yeah, because it's like drawing extra cards from the deck.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have a winning hand, so every time you draw a card, it takes a piece of your soul.
Yeah.
Because you're having to pay something to get that card.
Yeah.
And then you flip that card and you realize that it wasn't what you expected it to be, or it wasn't what you expected it to be based on the look on the person's face that you took it from.
Wow.
So it's like playing Uno. you know it's exactly how it is. It's like sometimes you get a multi-card, you can just pick any color, and sometimes it's like it doesn't always. Sometimes it's a reversal card. The music industry is very tricky. It's not for you. Record labels are not for you. You have to be strong enough to manage yourself and manage your own music and really aim to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You'll find more success without a record label than you do with a record label. If you do get signed to a label, usually it's because you've already done 80-90% of the work,
Yeah.
and they just come and pick you up for marketing and buy into your music. But
Mm.
you should already have yourself established. So you got, so many of these young artists. I want a record deal. I want a record deal. I'm like, you sure about that?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean anything. They could sign you 1 week and you're dropped 2 weeks later. But
Yeah.
then when you get dropped, you're locked into a contract for 5 years. So if the right people want to sign you
Can't
up, they
get you.
can't.
Wow.
They can't sign you up because you're locked into that contract for 5 years.
Yeah, that's the inside
So
of the music business.
yeah, there's 180 deals, 360 deals, and deals that don't do nothing. You think that they're going to be beneficial to you, but they're not.
Yeah, I got
So
a friend in the industry who's done very, very well, and he says the key for him is he always owned the rights. He was a composer, he was the performer. He owned it all. He said this way, if it ever hit, that he got paid. He
oh,
said he.
absolutely. It's
He
always
says,
best. It's always
yeah,
best to own your own writing, be in
yeah,
control. Writing the publishing of music is the key.
yep, yeah.
Owning the publishing.
He always talked about the guy who wrote all the Celine Dion song. He's like some multimillionaire. Even like
Yeah,
with Elton John had that Bernie Taupin or whatever that did all his
yeah.
writing.
That's why there was a huge fight between Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, because he bought all of the publishing for the Beatles music.
Yeah, he owned it all.
Yeah, and he owned it all, and Paul McCartney felt hella betrayed by Michael Jackson for that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's where the money's at. It's in the publishing. Who uses the songs, royalties on the song. You can't get royalties off of a stage performance, but you can get royalties off the songs you wrote for the stage performance.
that's right. Yeah, and that's
So
why I think sometimes you'll see bands tour until they're 140 years old because they have to.
yeah.
you
Well,
know.
I mean, I think who's Gene Simmons said it best. He says, after 1988, it was over. He says, and that doesn't count for Nirvana because they only did two studio albums.
Yeah.
He says, but before that I mean, well, U2, you can't, U2 was from the early 80s, and today they've banged out I don't know how many albums, and they're still successful.
Yeah, they're still doing
Um,
good.
Tom Petty, I don't even talk about what he did, but he kind of like eloped out of the studio and kind of made a dash and eloped with his EP and kind of didn't want the writers to take it. He just kind of blackballed the studio and said, "No, you're not going to own my stuff." And got more and more Journey. Everybody knows Journey. That's before '88. So a lot of the bands from 1988 going forward. Excuse me, I'm yawning. Not like a lot of those guys from 1988 going forward. Not a whole lot of them had success. There was one-hit wonders or two-hit wonders or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't hear much about the bands in the 90s. I mean, Pearl Jam, they only did like one or two albums,
Yeah.
and they were good, but
Yeah.
they didn't have continuation of life as far as being successful goes.
Yeah, and if they did, they were small, like Counting Crows or somebody like that.
Yeah, but I
They
mean,
still tour and they put out a record every year. You
but
know
yeah,
what I mean?
if you looked at like, well, you had your one hit wonders in the '80s, but if you look at
Yeah.
like people like Led Zeppelin, Boston,
Oh
I
yeah, there's
mean,
nothing like that anymore.
yeah,
Yeah,
Jefferson
doesn't exist.
Starship. I mean,
And I think
Meatloaf.
YouTube has changed a lot of that too. The industry's totally different.
Yeah,
You know.
it totally has. And you know what? I read their book, the spiritual journey of U2, Walk On. That
Yeah.
was a really interesting book. You know, they weren't Catholic. They actually went to a school called Shekinah, a
Hmm.
church called
Yeah.
Shekinah Ministries in Ireland. So there's a real deep rooted background in their walk with God. You know, of
Oh yeah.
it's really cool to read that book about Bono and the Edge and what they did. And I mean, obviously, I can't justify them. I can't validate or justify them drinking and partying, but
Hmm.
something happened to something significant happened to them, and it stayed with them the rest of their life. And I really do believe Bono loves Jesus with all his heart. He's
Yeah.
definitely born again.
Yeah, and you
You
can hear it
know,
in the lyrics. It's like Creed. You know, that early Creed music had a lot of spiritual overtones and
yeah,
stuff like that. You know.
yeah. And only Scott denies that. You know,
Yeah.
but Bono's just straight out about it. You can
Yeah.
hear it in his lyrics. You know how sincere and passion and impassioned he is about what he does.
Yeah.
And then he does stuff for Africa, and
Oh
he's
yeah.
just he's a great humanitarian, and I heard he's just a great human being, and he actually likes the Message Bible, and he sought the guy that wrote that,
Yeah, I
and him
remember
and
that.
that
Yeah.
him and it's on YouTube. You can see him and the guy
Yeah.
that wrote the Message Bible and their discussions they've had about that, and what spoke into his life and motivated him in regards to that. So I
Yeah.
think you got a lot of people in the industry that are really, really searching. And if those are not searching, then who knows? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as you now, like with your ministry, and I mean, I know you're in business too, and like
Yeah.
so, what's going on? Like, where are you headed to? What's
Well,
happening with that?
my wife passed away
Yeah.
of breast cancer 2 years ago, so that was a bit of and that's kind of where I'm at with that. I'm
Mm,
still dealing with some delay. I'm dealing with some delayed trauma and stuff that I should have dealt with a long time ago.
mm-hmm.
So I'm still dealing with that. So I had a few life changing events besides that happened, and I just had to do a complete reset. And obviously, Pastor Rodney and Adonico helped us get her back on her feet, and it's rebuild that and working on my relationship with my son, and obviously raising my daughter. So I do get out and minister when I can, but I'm not really putting a whole lot of emphasis on that because if your kids are going to hell and you've saved the world, then what is that? What have you done?
Right.
So, but I do go out and preach. I'm actually going to leave to go to Honolulu with my daughter in June. I'm preaching 2 Sundays at a church out there. So I'll be out there for a week and a half. And then I might go on a mission trip this year to Brazil with Alive to Love, or I might go back to South Africa for a month and do some ministry there and visit family. So,
Yeah.
but
I'd
yeah,
say the number one ministry for you is just being the minister of a father.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
I
Just
mean,
that. And,
you could run around the world and get them, like you said, get a million people saved, but that family is number one. Because
yeah.
I
And
mean,
you,
even like in your story, like you knew the Lord, you were raised in the church, and then you still went
correct.
off. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And so you don't want
Correct.
that for your kids. You know what I mean?
No, no, I don't. You know what, Mark? I mean, my daughter tonight led somebody to Jesus, and it was awesome. And the fire
Yeah.
of God hit her in the car. She was like, had to take her sweater off. I
Yeah.
mean, she was getting hit by the anointing. She said, "Dad, I can't handle this. You got to tell the Lord to take it off me." Tell the Lord
Wow.
and I'm laughing. I'm like, "Fire!"
I love it.
So, it's cool watching my daughter have these incredible encounters with Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's almost better than preaching. It's just seeing your kids get touched and your kids get ministered to by the Lord, and that's ministry in itself. And so, I mean, I still get out there. I mean, my daughter led this girl to the beach. I mean, this German girl's on the beach. Her grandmother just died, and I said, "Let me go share your testimony with her." So she went and shared her testimony with her and led her to Jesus. I mean, that's
Wow.
ministry right there.
Yeah.
And
Right. Right.
and so I think it's just one step at a time.
Yeah.
and doing God knows where to find you. He knows what your number is, so when it's time for me to do anything, if I need to do anything else, he knows where to find me.
Another thing is there's a lot of people who go through loss, like you went through major loss,
Yeah.
and they get really bitter with God. They say, God, why didn't you step in? Why didn't you intervene? Um, you know, and I'm sure that there's those emotions that we all go through, whenever we
Yeah.
deal with it. But, what kept you, like what keeps you going as far as like, because to talk to the people, because there's other people out there I know, personally
Yeah.
I know, that are dealing
Yeah.
with this,
So what I say about that, there comes a point when you're dealing with tragedy, you're dealing with loss, that you got to realize that it's beyond your control,
Mm,
and it boils down to that person's faith and what they have discussed with God. So in regards to my wife at that time, it just comes to a place to where I can't tell her what to do. You know what I mean? I couldn't tell her what to do. I couldn't tell her how it needed to be. She ultimately had to do business with God. And I think, when, you know, I, just with past experiences with the Lord, um, I think it was just like, okay, um, it's between them and God, just like
yeah,
Kelly, Howard Brown.
yeah,
Like, there was only her, her dad's faith can only take her so far.
yeah,
And then anything that happened beyond that is between Kelly and Jesus. You know,
right,
there comes a place to where you can't interfere with that person's discussion with the Lord, because it really is the Lord in them.
mm,
And if for whatever reason they go, instead of being bitter and angry with God, rather release them and show them as a gift, and just say, Lord, I release this. I'm not going to hold it. I mean, I even told the Lord myself, I said, God, no matter what happens, I'm not going to be mad at you.
yeah,
I'm not
that's
going to be
good,
upset with you. I'm not going to blame you for this.
yeah,
I refuse to blame you for this. I
that's awesome,
refuse to, question you on it. And I
yeah,
don't think I ever really have. You never really sit there and say, why?
yeah,
Because what does that do?
mm,
I mean, sin's in the world. We go from a state of second law, third thermodynamics. We go from a state of order to disorder, right?
right,
So I couldn't sit there and justify why that happened. But you just have to move on,
yeah,
and then just roll with the punches, and everybody responds to it differently. You know what I mean? And at different seasons and at different places.
yeah, right,
And I think that after that had happened, for me, it was more about dealing with my own internal grief from me dying as a person, and me trying to figure out my identity and who I was. And
mm,
okay, how do I figure this out? And I think I really struggled with that,
yeah,
because half of who I was died, and there was a hole in my heart, and it's like, okay, I got to figure out who I am
right,
as an individual. And I think that that's the journey, that's the real journey I'm on.
mm,
And there's been a lot of crying. I cried in
mm,
Cape Town. You know what I mean? I'd go pray, and I still cry because I'm still trying to, it's like a Rubik's cube. You know what I mean? You're really trying to you think you get all the colors, and then there's one side that's got one color dot. You're like,
right,
oh, I have to go back and figure out how to get rid of this color so that I can line up all the other colors. Because you can have the color right in three sides, and you go to the fourth side, and there's one little color that's missing. You're like, oh, how do I fix this? And so it's a process of adjusting and readjusting, adjusting, readjusting, and just fine tuning it and getting it right.
right,
And that doesn't happen overnight. You know what I mean? When it comes to dealing with things, it's like being a dad. I struggle with being a dad because my daughter's so used to having her mother around. So now I have to be the mom and the dad.
yeah,
And I gotta figure stuff out from that perspective, and that's not easy because I'm a male, I'm not a female. So when it comes
mm,
time to talking female stuff, my daughter has to lean on people coming into her life that are older than her, that are female, that are not her mom.
mm.
And but God's faithful, and He's been sending the right people to her, which is awesome.
Yeah, and with the church, that church family really steps in, I'm sure,
Oh yeah,
to fill
look,
the
I
gap.
mean, the church family's been great. I didn't plan on coming back to Tampa
Mm-hmm.
at all. That wasn't in the cards at all. Um, I plan on staying in Jacksonville, but I needed help with a car. And so I reached out to Pastor Rodney, and he bought me a car. And he says, I want to see you. And so I went and saw him, and I said, but then I just saw there was nothing for us after being in Jacksonville for a while. There was more favor down here than there was up there. And it was just, coming back here and just starting over, you know what I mean? And getting things right. And there's been a lot of grace in our life to do that, and got an apartment and got all our furniture and just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. Now, as far as like your obviously your licensed ministry and things like that, if people wanted to sow into you, what's the best way to do that? Because I mean, people are gonna hear this, they want to be a part of what you're doing.
Yeah. So that'd be great. Actually, we do have a few needs in regards to ministry. I believe in God to, if they want to sow into the ministry, they can do Cash App, or they could Venmo, or they could Zelle.
Okay.
I don't know if you want me how I could send that to you.
Yeah, you send it to me, or if you can just what your Cash App is or whatever. Or...
Yeah, I could just send you those links for that.
Yeah,
That would be
send
great.
it to me, and I'll post it up in the comments whenever we do it.
That would be really,
send me all
really
your
great.
links. So like if you're watching the video, check the comments, and especially on YouTube, I'll have it, and then on the other platforms.
No, it'd be really great. It'd be really great.
Because in ministry, there's always a need,
Yeah, there's always a need. But I believe in God to see what the Lord does this year. Like I said, maybe I'll go do Christmas this year with the family. We'll see. I want my daughter to spend as much time with her grandparents before they pass away.
Amen.
So,
that's good.
So it's one day at a time.
Yeah, that's so important. We travel thousands of miles so my son can be with grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, and he's always down. Your son's always got like look like he owns a yacht. A yacht and a private jet. He's like a mini Tony Stark.
He's like a mini Tony Soprano.
Yeah, he totally is. With his tiramisu.
Yeah, hair slicked back with a 3-piece suit.
Yeah, with the Rolex watch on.
Oh yeah, blessed with a Rolex Morgan 300. Yeah, he's rolling.
Totally.
So one thing I'm going to do to wrap up is, I always like to ask people, for advice. Like here we are. I've been in business my whole life. Stepping into ministry full time, not full time, but as full time as I'll ever get. You know what I mean? The Lord launched us out. He put Europe on our heart. We're going for about a month this summer. He's starting to open up doors for us. But shifting into that, like, what's the advice you give to even me and other people who are just getting started out?
Well, just stay humble and love people. Always have an attitude to serve. Don't ever feel like you've arrived. Consider others. And how you would consider yourself. The Bible says in Proverbs that a liberal soul shall be made fat, and he who waters shall be watered himself. So just continue to pour into people and encourage people and bless people. You can bless people other ways than money.
Yeah.
So it just that's really the key. It's just sowing into people's lives and being a part of somebody else's vision. If your vision isn't happening, get a part of a vision that's bigger than you, and be part of that vision until yours manifests. But whatever you sow now, you'll harvest later. So if you sow into serving a ministry now, then when it's time for your ministry to happen, it'll manifest. That's the best piece of advice I can give.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. We've been serving faithfully for 6 years at the river, and before that, forever. I mean, I can't go to one church where I wasn't working sound or kids or youth. Or
I did children's church, soul winning, you name it. I ushered, I did security at the river. I've done it all.
People always say, "Man, do you still go to the river?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm back in the portables teaching the kids."
Listen, I'd go work on a crusade field, come back to the River Cafe, and make salads for Bible school students.
Yeah,
that was. Yeah. I wasn't too good for that,
And it's funny because one thing you said that really resonates with me was that you said lift up the hands of other people, and the Lord showed me this broadcast. He said, "Look, start where you're at with what you got." And he goes, honor other ministers and other business people who are already out there doing it. And he said, that's it. Just do that. Focus on that for now. And then the doors will open up for you. So I said,
and that's it. That's what you do.
Let's go.
One day at a time. Yeah.
Well, listen, first of all, I want to say that your story is just beginning. What we heard is the past, but the present is here, but the future is so bright for you. I really believe that. And I believe
Amen.
That what you're stepping into is going to be a whole nother dimension, a whole nother level. there's going to be a time of a pause, and for you and your family to kind of reset. But I can see it that there's something that's gonna, it's like that launching, you know what I mean? Like you're getting pulled back and just get ready because it's coming. I think
Amen.
yeah. So your best years are still out ahead of you, and I can't wait to bring you back on here and get your the next recap from Sadi.
That'll be
Wow,
awesome.
what an amazing testimony. Every time I do one of these broadcasts, I actually get more out of it than I think anybody, really. So it's just an amazing thing. The Bible says that they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And that's really a big part of what we're doing with these broadcasts. It's sharing other people's testimonies. We want to get more of this out there because the more testimonies that are shared, the more that we can overcome. When you hear somebody else and what they went through, it makes it so much, not so much easier, but it gives you this victory before you even set out, because you say, hey, that person went through it and they were victorious. I can do it too, and I can take ground for the kingdom. It's been an honor to be around these people who are out there getting it done, whether it's in business or it's in ministry. And there's more to come. So we need you. We need your support. We need your partnership. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link below to my Zephy account to either partner with us, or if you want to be a part of our European trip, whatever it is that you want to do, because there's so much coming this year between Europe and we're going into Guatemala and other countries in Central America. And we're calling it out all through the United States to bring the message of kingdom business and marketplace ministry to people who really don't know their place in ministry. They know I'm good in business or, in the secular world, but I don't know how to cross that over. And that's what we're doing. So if you want to be a part of that, if you want to book us, you can always send us an email or go to my website, The Alfanos, Alfanos, ALFANOS.com. Or alfanoministries.com. Either one goes to the same spot. And you can just, ask for more information. You can contact me directly at Marc at M-A-R-C. It's not M-A-R-K, it's M-A-R-C at alfanoministries.com if you'd like to book us to come to share at your church. And like I said, if you'd like to partner with us, we prefer Zephy, but we also do Cash App and Zelle and all that other stuff too, or even snail mail. If you wanted to send us a check directly, it goes to 10642 Lake Montauk, Montauk Drive, Riverview, Florida 33578. And, so either way, any of that works for us. But, we're planning on bringing more content like this. We've already got a bunch recorded that'll be put out mostly on Fridays. That's my plan, is to put these out every Friday. So I hope you'd enjoyed it, and I hope it touched you as much as it touched me. So God bless you. And thank you so much for tuning in. This broadcast has been brought to you by friends and partners of Alfano Ministries International. Thank you for partnering with us today.